with time slipping through my fingers. I knew I was making a terrible decision, but I could not die knowing they would get away. So I called out to our ancestors for Kitsunetsuki, possession by a fox.
We all know how the Nogitsune arrived on our plane of existence. Noshiko called it to possess her so she could take revenge on the U.S. Army for the atrocities at Oak Creek. Nogitsune answered on the first ring, but it chose to take over Reese's body instead. Now, I guess that was because controlling a corpse is just easier than controlling a powerful celestial kitsune, no matter how willing she claims to be. Anyway, it had complete control of Reese's body from the very start and just ran amok. Nogitsune left lots and lots of corpses, which led to that big wolf and fox superhero team up, and then Nogitsune ends up in a jar. That is where it sat for 70 years. Then along comes Jennifer Blake and her earth-shattering storm powers. The jar breaks, and Nogitsune is free once again. So, here you are, a Nogitsune lost in the spiritual and literal darkness, and who should cross your path but this hunka man? Okay, this spindly, angst-ridden kid. But still, Styles is here, and he has something that only one other person in this collapsing root cellar can offer to the Nogitsune: a way in. You see, Styles had just died for a little while. Well, sort of died. Okay, he symbolically died. This whole Ice Cube baptism opened Styles, Allison, and Scott to another plane of existence, and that opening allowed Nogitsune to slip right into Styles uninvited. And yes, Nogitsune can control other people without this sort of crack in their soul, but that control is temporary and limited. Styles' innermost being was open during this period, which is why Nogitsune was able to get such a strong hold right from the start. But Allison and Scott also had openings, so why not them? Well, it couldn't take over Scott because void cannot be two things. It cannot be fox and wolf. So Scott is not an option. Why not Allison, a strong, competent, and highly skilled hunter? I don't know for sure, but when I look at my choices as a parasitic spirit form, wanting to hide and gather strength, I would probably go into the least likely suspect. Allison is also strong-willed and stubborn, even when she's 100% wrong. She's so stubborn that Nogitsune might not have been able to manipulate her as easily as it did Styles. Also, hunters tend to kill themselves instead of becoming supernatural, so that has to be a consideration. Anyway, for whatever reason, Nogitsune chooses Styles and begins working him in an effort to get control. At this point in the story, it could really only use Styles' body when he was unconscious or semi out of it. That's why his perceptions were so off for those first few weeks. Nogitsune is effing with his brain. It's wiggling in and setting up house.
Okay.
Now, once it's all cozy inside Styles, it sent out that first fly to William Barrow and began growing a tumor in his gut. It could then feed on all the chaos caused by Barrow's escape.
One thing, doing it when there's a mass murderer spotted nearby is insane! If I were 4 years younger, I'd punch you!
The electric shock Styles got at the end, the one that magnetized his bat, was a great big cherry on top of all of this. Nogitsune really feasted in this episode and got a big boost to its strength and control over its host. Now, I don't want to give the impression that Styles was just letting all this happen. Detective Styles had already started working out that something wasn't quite right with him.
How would I get phosphorus on my kid?
Have you been handling chemicals?
No, I don't think that.
Way back in Illuminated, he was piecing it all together, but not quickly enough to really take any action.
Are you all right?
I don't know.
This is also when Nogitsune cranked up Styles' dementia symptoms. Now, causing him so much pain helped it feed on his fear and anger, and in turn, all the people who loved Styles, his dad, his friends, they all started feeding the parasite with their worry and concern for Styles. This is one reason why he is the perfect host. Styles is beloved, and any threat to his well-being generates a lot of misery that the monster feeds on.
Melissa?
At this point, Nogitsune is strong enough to exert more control over Styles, even when he's awake. This was the period just prior to Riddle. Nogitsune sets up a disaster at the hospital and a few other tricks, but it still wasn't in complete control. It couldn't be without Styles' agreement. But Styles fought it. He ran off into the woods in an effort to keep Void from hurting anyone else. Unfortunately, fighting it actually fed the monster even more, with the entire police force, all his friends and family, completely freaked the fuck out. The result of all that is an exhausted Styles and a well-fed Nogitsune by the time we get to this MRI scene. The threats against his family are just too much, and Styles finally gives in. Now, we all saw what this creature could do with an unwilling host.
Lose something? Hey, Carl!
Jared, it would be very helpful if you could resist throwing up on the potential explosive device.
Get down!
Imagine what it could accomplish inside someone who was completely willing right from the start.
You want retribution? Set me free. And we'll play a new game. A game of chaos. Strife. And pain!